So what's been the reaction in the US to the shooting of Charlie Kirk?
More than anything else, I think shock. Regardless of whether you agreed with him or not, that sort of violence is widely condemned across all halls of power in the United States, and anyone saying otherwise is condemned for not condemning it. This is something that really goes against what the United States stands for, and as much as people may disagree with many of Charlie Kirk's views and find them distasteful, at the end of the day, he was a model of someone who was willing to engage with people he disagreed with. And that is something that I think even his political opponents would praise him for. He would willingly go on campuses, which are not known for being conservative, if anything, the opposite, and engage with students in an open forum. And it was the exact sort of open forum that he was engaging in Utah that ultimately led to his death at a far too young age.
So he wasn't an elected official or even a candidate, but he spoke about politics and seemingly drove political engagement. Jared, what do you think was behind his popularity?
Yeah, you're right. He was not a political official. He was not in the Trump administration, and he actually did not want to be in the Trump administration. He famously saw his calling as something broader than simply political office, but instead changing the movement, the conservative movement itself. And you can't deny that he was impactful. When he got started, just in terms of numbers alone, he had about $78,000 when he got started when he was 18 years old, and most of that was from his father, who was a famous or fairly well-known Republican donor. But just last year, the revenue that he had in his organization, Turning Points USA, was $85 million. And that was basically purely himself. I don't think there's anyone that was more impactful in the conservative movement for getting young voters to vote for Donald Trump than Charlie Kirk. So as much as there has been a lot of political violence, and some may say that the victims are quickly soon forgotten, or this doesn't actually have a lasting impact, the loss of Charlie Kirk, the undeniable reality, will be very significant. He was unique in his ability to get young voters not only passionate about the conservative causes, but get them into the voting booth and get them voting for Donald Trump. The Trump sort of approval rating amongst young voters was significantly higher in the last few years than it has been ever before. And I think a large part of that is due to Charlie Kirk.
So we don't know who shot him, Jared, or the motive, but surely given the context of the event, this raises concerns about political debate in the US.
It really does. And there's been research on this. And the one think tank, CSIS in Washington, D.C., said that in the past 5 years, the amount of attacks against government targets or people with partisan political beliefs like Charlie Kirk has increased to triple the amount than it was in the preceding 25 years combined, right? So we are seeing a massive change just in the numbers, but also qualitatively as well. If you talk to politicians these days, you will find that a number of them are actually afraid about going against the grain or saying something controversial against maybe their party or against their local constituents, because they are physically afraid of the safety of their family and themselves. This is something that America, I think, has always been against. Unfortunately, however, the United States does have quite a lengthy history of political violence.
And what does his death say about a shift in power and politics in the US? Charlie Kirk was hugely popular, hugely influential. He wasn't an elected official, as you've already covered. But someone like Charlie Kirk wouldn't have existed 10 or 15 years ago in the US, would he?
No, he wouldn't have been. I think he was in many ways more impactful than any mainstream voice in terms of the way that he was able to get, as I said earlier, the young people to not only support Donald Trump, but also vote for Donald Trump. I think his loss is a major one for the conservative movement. I don't say the Republican Party, but I really do mean the conservative movement, because he had a far bigger tent in his followers and amongst young conservatives than any one party. In many ways, he outflanked the Republican Party itself for where it was working with young voters. And so when he started, he was not well known, as was covered by your colleague. At 18 years old, he was just a young, ambitious person. But I think everyone quickly realized just how skilled he was at as an orator at getting, in a charismatic way, young American voters to the conservative cause. So I think it was a unique opportunity given social media and the way that we consume news these days, but you can't deny that even in a different era, he probably would have been pretty impactful given how talented he was with his orative skills.
So what are going to be the repercussions of his death?
Well, interestingly enough, that the Utah stop where he was speaking at that university was the first in a new sort of campaign he's going around, in my view, kickstarting efforts at addressing the lagging support for Donald Trump amongst young Americans. The sort of approval rating amongst young Americans for Donald Trump has decreased significantly. During the election, it was as much as 55% amongst young Americans, and now it's closer to maybe 27%, and that's amongst 18 to 29-year-olds. I think he was in many ways looking at addressing that key stat, but it's hard to see anyone being able to fill his shoes. He was so good at being charismatic and inspiring those young university Americans, and those campus events that he was at, like the one he was at where he was murdered, were unique events that even people who were against him wanted to attend because it was such a spectacle. Mm-hmm. I think it really is hard to see that this does anything but hurt younger support for Donald Trump amongst conservative Americans.